My brother sold our late father's tools for quick cash, so I bought them back at auction and exposed his lies to everyone he respected. I'm a 29-year-old man, and the sound of my father's old toolbox still echoes in my memory. Every clang of metal, every creak of the wooden lid meant something. It meant another project with Dad in the garage, another lesson in patience and pride. He wasn't a rich man, but his tools built more than furniture. They built the kind of discipline you can't buy. After he passed, that toolbox became the one thing that still smelled like sawdust, oil, and cigarette smoke that lingered on every handle. When it came time to divide his things, I didn't fight much. Mark, my older brother, always had a way of getting what he wanted. He was Mom's golden boy charming, loud, the one who could talk his way through anything. I was the quiet one who fixed the broken steps while he broke promises. So when he told Mom he should keep the toolbox to remember Dad, I stayed silent. She nodded like it was already decided, and just like that, the most important piece of our father's legacy left my hands. A few days later, I visited Mark's house. The box sat untouched in his garage, dusty and forgotten. "I'll clean it up when I get time," he said with a shrug, tossing a beer can into the bin. Something twisted in my chest, anger maybe, but mostly sadness. I realized then that what he took wasn't just wood and metal. He took the last physical proof that Dad existed in our lives. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter that love wasn't measured in possessions. But standing in that dim garage, hearing the faint hum of a drill in the distance, I felt something I'd never admit aloud. The first crack of resentment. I thought my father's tools would stay in the family forever. I was wrong. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the kind of person who fades into the background, while louder voices take control of the room. Mark was the opposite. He had this natural confidence that made people trust him instantly, even when he didn't deserve it. Growing up, I watched him lie straight to our parents' faces, only to be forgiven with a smile. "He's just impulsive," Mom would say, like it was some harmless quirk. Meanwhile, when I made even the smallest mistake, I'd get the lecture about responsibility and being more like your brother. After Dad passed, that imbalance only grew. Mark swooped in to help Mom with finances, organizing everything from the will to the funeral arrangements. I wanted to help too, but every time I tried, she said, "Mark's already handling it, dear. Don't complicate things." It stung. It always stung. Mark thrived on being the center of attention. He wore grief like a costume tears at the right moments, comforting words when people were watching, then laughter with his friends once the door closed. I stayed busy cleaning Dad's workshop, trying to fix up the place to keep his spirit alive. Those old walls felt sacred, like the last space that still belonged to him. But even there, I couldn't escape the shadow of my brother. One night, while sorting through bolts and measuring tapes, I found one of Dad's old notes, his handwriting, shaky but familiar. "If something breaks, fix it right. Don't take shortcuts." That line hit harder than I expected. Mark had built a life out of shortcuts, flashy cars, shallow friends, constant debts. I told myself I wouldn't get dragged into his mess again. But deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last. Mark had a way of turning every family memory into an opportunity for himself, and I had no idea the next one would cost me more than I could ever replace. It was a regular Thursday morning when everything changed. I was at my workshop tightening a bolt under an old Chevy hood. My coworker Darren called out, "Hey man, isn't this your dad's stuff?" He turned his phone toward me, an online auction listing for vintage tools with engraved initials. My heart dropped. The photos showed Dad's exact set, the custom wrenches he'd hand-etched with his initials. Psh! Even the faded red toolbox was there. One corner chipped from when I dropped it as a kid. For a moment I just froze. I thought maybe someone had stolen them, or maybe it was a coincidence. But then I saw the seller's name, Mark R. My chest tightened. It wasn't a mistake. My brother had sold Dad's tools. I called him immediately. He picked up on the second ring, his voice too casual. "Hey, what's up, little bro? You sold Dad's tools?" I asked, my voice shaking. He laughed. "Relax, man. It's just old junk. I thought I'd make some space in the garage. They were his legacy, Mark." I snapped. He sighed. "You're being dramatic. They were collecting dust. I needed the cash. The way he said it, I needed the cash, like it was the most natural thing in the world, made my blood boil. I wanted to drive over and scream in his face, but instead I hung up. I sat there in the quiet workshop, hands trembling, surrounded by the sound of dripping oil and ticking clocks. I stared at the photo again. The auction had just started and bids were already climbing. Those tools had built everything good in our lives. Now they were just a line of numbers on a screen. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him erase Dad that easily. I'd buy them back, every single one, no matter what it cost. The auction was held 2 days later in a small community. Hall on the edge of town, the kind of place where every creak of the wooden floor echoed like judgment. I sat in the back, hood pulled low, pretending to scroll my phone, while my heart pounded in my chest. Rows of folding chairs filled with local collectors, mechanics, and old men who probably didn't even know what those tools meant. Then I saw it. Dad's red toolbox on the display table under the fluorescent lights. They'd polished it, but I could still spot the faded initials scratched near the handle. RH. It looked out of place among the other antiques. Too personal to be sold, too sacred to be touched. The auctioneer started fast. Lot number 23, vintage tool collection, great condition. I gritted my teeth as bids started flying. 50, 70, 100. I raised my hand. 150, I said. From the corner of the room, Mark appeared. He was leaning against the wall in his leather jacket. Laughing with someone like this was a casual business transaction, not the desecration of our father's memory. I kept my head down. The price kept climbing, and so did my pulse. At 270, the room thinned, just me and one other bidder left. When the hammer dropped at 300, I exhaled shakily. The tools were mine again, but the victory felt hollow. As I carried the box out, its weight pressed into my palms like guilt and grief combined. I'd spent half my savings, but that wasn't what hurt. What broke me was the realization that I had to buy back my own father's legacy from my brother. Outside, under the dim parking lot light, I looked at the box and whispered, "Welcome home, Dad." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something uglier. I thought reclaiming Dad's tools would bring me peace. But instead, it opened a wound I didn't know was still bleeding. A week after the auction, I started hearing things, whispers from people around town. Little comments that didn't make sense at first. "Your brother's such a good guy," a customer told me one morning while paying for a repair. "Selling your dad's tools to raise money for charity? That's really touching." I froze, wrench still in hand. "Charity?" I asked. "Yeah," the man said, smiling. "He said he wanted to honor your dad's memory by helping others." "That's beautiful, man." I forced a smile, but inside my stomach twisted. Charity. Mark hadn't just lied. He'd turned his betrayal into a publicity stunt. That night I checked social media and sure enough, there it was. A post of Mark standing beside the now empty garage captioned, "Dad always believed in giving back. Proud to keep his spirit alive." Thousands of likes. Comments full of praise. Even Mom shared it, writing, "Your father would be so proud of you, Mark." That one broke me. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. The man who'd stolen and sold our father's legacy was now being celebrated for it. I tried to stay quiet, but every post, every comment, every fake smile from the people who believed his story made it harder to breathe. I printed out the auction receipt, the screenshots, everything that proved the truth, but I didn't know what to do with them yet. Because how do you fight a liar everyone already loves? How do you tell your mother her favorite son turned her husband's memory into cash? I didn't have those answers yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stay silent forever. A few days later, I got a call that would twist the knife even deeper. It was from the auctioneer, an older man named Gary who'd handled the sale. His voice was careful, like he wasn't sure he should be saying what he was about to say. "Hey, son," he started. "Just wanted to thank you for your business the other day. And, I thought you should know your brother wasn't the only one behind that sale." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" He cleared his throat. "Mark listed those tools through his business partner. Said they were clearing assets from an old shop. The paperwork had both their signatures. My blood ran cold. Wait, assets from what shop? The one registered under your father's name? Gary said softly. The old workshop on Birch Street. I thought you knew. And the call ended. I just sat there in the silence of my garage, heart thudding against my ribs. I pulled up the business registry online, and there it was. RH Workshop LLC, mortgaged and transferred. Mark had taken out a loan against the very property Dad left behind, and sold everything inside under the guise of charity. It wasn't desperation. It was deliberate, calculated. I felt sick. I'd always known Mark was selfish, but this was another level. This was betrayal dressed up as business. I imagined him signing those papers, probably smiling, telling himself it was just paperwork. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my small apartment, pacing, staring at the walls like they might give me answers. The anger felt different this time, quieter, sharper. It wasn't rage anymore. It was resolve. He'd taken Dad's name, his tools, his legacy. But I was going to take back the truth, even if it meant burning down the image Mark had built for himself. I decided to stop waiting for the right moment. I was going to create it. I called Mom a week later and told her I wanted to hold a small dinner to honor Dad's death anniversary. Nothing fancy, I said. Just family. A quiet night to remember him. She sounded touched, even emotional. That's a lovely idea, she whispered. Mark will be so happy you thought of it. Mark, always at the center of every sentence. I gritted my teeth and told her to invite him. If this was going to end, it needed to happen face to face. The night of the dinner, I arrived early at Mom's house. The place looked exactly as it had when Dad was alive. The same framed wedding photo. The same faint scent of engine oil and cinnamon that somehow clung to the walls. I set the table with her best dishes and placed one of Dad's smaller tools, his old measuring tape, beside a candle in the middle. It was my quiet tribute. Mark showed up late, as usual, swaggering in with a bottle of wine and that salesman grin that used to charm everyone. Didn't know you had a sentimental side, little bro, he said, clapping my shoulder. Good on you for organizing this. Throughout dinner, he played his role perfectly, the devoted son, the successful brother, the hero who kept Dad's legacy alive. Mom glowed with pride, laughing at his stories, soaking in every word. I kept quiet, smiling when necessary, my stomach turning with every false toast. At one point, Mark raised his glass. To Dad, the man who taught us the value of hard work? My jaw clenched. I wanted to call him out right there, but I stopped myself. Not yet, because this dinner wasn't just for remembrance. It was the setup. And soon, everyone at that table would finally see the man behind the mask. That night, after everyone left, the silence in Mom's house felt heavier than it ever had. The dishes were still on the table, the candles flickering low. I was helping her clean up when I heard soft sniffles from the living room. I walked in quietly and saw her sitting on the couch, staring at an open letter. Her hands trembled as she held it. Mom? I asked gently. What's wrong? She looked up, eyes red. It's from the bank, she whispered. They said my account's overdrawn. Her voice cracked. Mark said he just needed to borrow a little for the business. He promised he'd pay it back before I even noticed. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I took the paper from her, scanning the lines. He'd taken almost everything, her emergency savings, her retirement funds. He'd even transferred the workshop property to his company's name using her co-signature. Mom, I said, trying to steady my voice. You signed this? She nodded weakly. He said it was for tax reasons. I didn't think he'd... She stopped, pressing a shaking hand to her mouth. He's not a bad person. He's just under pressure. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't, not at her. She still saw him as the boy who brought her flowers on birthdays, not the man who drained her dry. I sat down beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She leaned against me, whispering, Don't hate him, okay? He's still your brother. I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I didn't see a brother anymore. I saw a parasite wearing a familiar face. When I got home, sat in the dark for hours, staring at the auction receipts and the letter from the bank spread out across my table. That was the night I hit rock bottom, the moment. I realized love and loyalty had become my own chains, and I knew if I didn't break them soon, Mark would ruin everything our father ever built. The next few days felt like I was walking through fog, every thought, every movement heavy with exhaustion and disgust. I couldn't stop replaying Mom's trembling voice, that blind trust she still had in him. But somewhere beneath the heartbreak, a quiet, focused anger began to grow. I wasn't going to scream anymore. I wasn't going to beg anyone to see the truth. I was going to show them. The first step was evidence. I went back to the auction house and asked for full transaction records. Gary, the auctioneer, hesitated at first, but finally handed me the paperwork, all signed in Mark's handwriting. His business partner's name was there too. I took photos, printed copies, and tucked them into a folder labeled for Mom. Next, I checked the local property registry. It confirmed what I already feared: Dad's workshop was officially under Mark's company, listed as business storage. My father's name had been replaced with corporate ink, but fate handed me one more weapon. One of Dad's old friends, Carl, came into my shop for a repair. As we talked, he mentioned casually, Mark told us he sold those tools to fund a youth mechanic program. That's real noble of him. My jaw tightened. I smiled faintly and said, "Yeah, noble." That's when I realized what I needed to do. I couldn't just expose him quietly; that would vanish in the noise. No, I had to pull the mask off in the exact place where he'd built his false reputation. So, I planned something Mark couldn't resist: a public tribute event. A workshop reopening in Dad's honor. Celebrating his legacy with Mark's name front and center on the invitation, and under the warm lights of that night, surrounded by every person he'd ever fooled. I was going to return the tools to where they belonged, and watch his lies collapse around him. For weeks I poured every ounce of energy into rebuilding the workshop. I scrubbed grease-stained walls, replaced cracked tiles, and restored every piece of Dad's equipment to working order. The air once again smelled like sawdust and engine oil, the scent of my childhood. Every night I stayed late, replaying old memories in my head, Dad humming under his breath. His hand on my shoulder as he said, "A man's work should outlive him." I made sure the invitations looked official, embossed paper, gold lettering, and a bold headline: "The RH Workshop Reopening Ceremony." I even added Mark's name beneath mine, knowing his ego would make him come running. When I called him, he answered with that confident smirk in his voice. "Wow, didn't think you had it in you to pull something like this off," he said. I forced a polite laugh. "It's for Dad. Thought we could do it together," he chuckled. "Yeah, sure. Maybe we'll finally get people to remember who really carried his legacy." Perfect. He was walking right into it. The night of the reopening, the place was packed. Old friends, neighbors, former coworkers, even some of Mark's business associates showed up, dressed in suits and fake smiles. Soft music played from a small speaker, and the warm light from the ceiling fixtures glowed against the red-painted walls. I'd displayed Dad's restored tools along one side of the room, each tagged with a small note about what project he'd used it for. Mark arrived late. Of course, wearing a tailored suit and that same careless grin. "This is impressive," he said, patting my back. "Didn't think you'd go all out? I'll take it from here when they start asking questions." "Yeah." I smiled. "Oh, don't worry, Mark. You'll definitely get your turn to speak. 'Cause tonight, for the first time in my life, the truth was going to have an audience, and my brother was going to have nowhere left to hide." When everyone settled in, the hum of conversation softened into expectant silence. I stood near the center of the workshop, my father's restored toolbox, gleaming under the lights like a quiet witness. Mark hovered off to the side, swirling a glass of wine, confident as ever. I took a breath and began. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said, my voice steady. This place meant everything to my dad. These tools, I gestured to the display, built our home, our memories, and, for some of us, our values. The crowd nodded politely. Mark smiled, the picture of proud brotherly support, but I continued. "These tools also remind me how easy it is to lose what we take for granted." I walked to the front table and picked up a small envelope. A few months ago, these same tools were listed at an auction under my brother's name. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mark's smile faltered. He sold them, claiming it was for charity. But here's the receipt, signed by him and his partner, showing otherwise. I laid the documents out one by one: auction slips, property transfers, the bank letter with Mom's drained account. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Mark stepped forward, voice cracking. This is out of context. You don't understand." I cut him off, calm but firm. "No, Mark, we understand perfectly. You sold Dad's legacy for cash, then lied about it. You took Mom's savings? You turned our father's memory into your business." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Mom stood frozen, one hand covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. I looked at Mark, pale, jaw tight, trapped under the weight of his own lies. "Dad's tools were meant to fix broken things," I said quietly. "But some things can't be fixed." And with that, I closed the toolbox lid. The echo of metal rang through the room like a gavel striking truth. After that night, nothing in our family looked the same. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. Within a week, everyone in town knew what Mark had done. His business partner pulled out of their company. His clients stopped taking calls. The golden image he'd spent years polishing crumbled almost overnight. Mom didn't speak to anyone for days. I'd stop by to check on her, only to find her sitting quietly in Dad's old armchair, staring at nothing. When she finally looked at me, her voice was small. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered. "But I guess deep down I always knew." She reached for my hand. "Your father would have been proud of you. Not for humiliating him, but for standing up for what's right." That hit me harder than anything. I hadn't realized until then how much I'd been craving her acknowledgement. I squeezed her hand and said, "I just wanted Dad's name to mean something again." As for Mark, he left town not long after. No goodbye, no apology. Just vanished. The last I heard, he was trying to start over somewhere else, still pretending to be the victim. But I didn't need revenge anymore. Watching him face the truth he'd built his life avoiding was enough. I kept the workshop open. Every day I fixed something small: a bike chain, a kitchen chair, an old watch, just like Dad used to. I let kids from the neighborhood stop by, teaching them the same lessons he taught me: patience, honesty, and pride in your work. Sometimes, late at night, I run my hand over the old toolbox. The initials are H, faint but still there. And I think about everything we lost. And what I got back. Not just the tools, but the truth, the peace, and the part of myself I'd buried trying to keep the family together. Because in the end, integrity was the only inheritance worth keeping.